All right, folks, we're going to call this meeting to order.
Representative Brady?
Here.
Representative Bratton?
Here.
Representative Chestek?
Here.
Representative Filer?
Here.
Representative Kelly?
Here.
Representative Lean?
Here.
Vice Chair Singh?
Here.
Representative Webb?
Here.
Chairman Washut?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everybody. Our good Chairman Washut his voice is feeling a little under the weather, and so I will be taking the helm today. So please excuse any bumps as we go through this. So before we begin, I want to say welcome, everyone. We're glad that you're here, and this is a really important time for the public to get involved in the lawmaking process. Before we continue, I'm going to walk through the rules as adopted by Management Council. Committee members, speakers, and audience members will conduct themselves in a civil and respectful manner at all times during a legislative meeting. Speakers will address all comments and questions to the chairman. Speakers will refrain from the use of individual names. Comments will be directed to the issue under consideration. Testimony that strays far from the topic is out of order. Speakers will refrain from making comments of a personal nature that reflect upon the character or conduct of a committee member or another speaker. Personal criticism, ridicule, and name-calling is forbidden. Speakers will refrain from the use of indecent or obscene language, fighting words, or other language which is disruptive to the orderly discussion at the meeting. Time limits for addressing the committee may be imposed depending on our agenda, which we don't have too crazy of an agenda today. For members of the public, audience members will refrain from distracting side conversations or speaking out when another person is talking. Audience members will refrain from shouting, booing, and other similar unruly behavior that impedes or disrupts the orderly conduct of this meeting. And when it comes to the enforcement of the rules, the chairman will request that a person who is violating a rule of decorum cease the violation. If the violation continues, the chairman will warn the person that he or she will be requested to leave the meeting room if the violation continues. If the violation continues, the chairman will order the person to leave the meeting room. And according to Wyoming statute 28.1.110 and 28.1.111, serious disorderly conduct may result in criminal prosecution. So with that, let's continue to our first bill of the day, which is House Bill 83. I believe Representative Pendergraph will be presenting that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's very good to be here. Nice to be in friendly confines of a different place than what I'm used to. Members, I bring you House Bill 83. It's fairly straightforward, fairly simple. I will admit right off the bat, we may need to make a couple of friendly amendments to it that we've spoken to, but I leave that to your greater wisdom. So let me present that portion. I would mention that my daughter, Sarah Applegate, is sitting beside me. She was involved in the case that got this whole thing started, at least in my mind, and she will be available for questions. And she also has a very brief statement as a part of the presentation of the bill. So begging your indulgence, I'd like to move into the bill. I bring you House Bill 83, Child Custody, Sex Offense, and Conviction Presumption. As it says, and I know that you're all very familiar with the bill, in the opening paragraph, it talks about no sex offender shall have unsupervised visitation with a child, and specifically in my mind, I'm talking about people who have to register as a sex offender. And generally, they can't be around other people's children at all. The problem comes up in certain relationship situations where it is their own child, and we have this collision, a troublesome collision between parental rights and the best interest of the child. We'll get into that here shortly. This paragraph does say, and I want to highlight this, requiring consideration of sex-related convictions when considering the best interest of a child in custody determinations upon divorce. You can what if yourself up one side and down the other, and what if, and then I'm specifically aimed at in a divorce proceeding when the judge sits down and has to decide how we're going to handle the children, that this sort of thing at least be understood. So it might be good at this point to break off for just a second, give you a very brief negative. I think everybody got a copy of the victim impact statement, which my daughter wrote, and it is rather lengthy. We don't want to get into the whole thing here. But the gist of the matter is that some years ago, my former son-in-law molested his niece in the ensuing divorce. He went to jail. And when he got back out, was on parole, they were beginning to negotiate, what are we going to do with the kids down the road? And my daughter, the rest of the family, we've been through this sort of thing in other families. And we know the recidivism rate. I would mention, and in that packet, I did send some information, a study on recidivism. And very difficult to do a study because a lot of these things never even get reported, as we know. But the interesting thing about that note that I'll just mention quickly is that the longer somebody goes without having an incident, the more likely there's one to come. And I found that interesting in that study. So we had some trepidation. He was trying to get unsupervised visitation. In fact, he actually at one point sued for full custody. And through this whole time, we knew that if he ever got the chance, this might happen again. And that was not fair to the family. It's not fair to the child. And it was certainly not fair even to this person who has this problem. It's not fair to put him in a place where he's tempted beyond what he is able to take. Well, the long and short of it is, at some point during this process, he did in fact molest my granddaughter. We felt like we knew it was coming, but we felt absolutely powerless to do anything about it. And so in speaking with the attorneys, a little bit with some of the other judges in the area, I was pointed toward the portion of our statute which this particular bill affects. In the statute, there are, Wyoming Statute 20-2-201, there are a number of what I believe are rebuttable presumptions that a judge should take into consideration. And all this does is add to that list, this is from page 2, line 13, whether either parent has a conviction for which the parent must register as a sex offender under the Wyoming statutes, and that Wyoming 719 describes the whole sex offender process. And then additionally, at the bottom of page 2, line 22, when considering an order for visitation, there must be a presumption. Perhaps the word rebuttable needs to be added to that. I'll leave that to your greater knowledge. That is not in the best interest of a child to grant unsupervised visitation of a parent who's required to register as a sex offender. So we're talking about a parent who is registered as a sex offender. Should he or she have unsupervised visitation? My response would be, I would presume not. That would put the weight of the burden on them to create a compelling reason why this is necessary. I'd like to take just a minute and allow my daughter, Sarah, to make a few comments if that is appropriate.
Any questions from the committee? Ms. Applegate, please state your name for the record.
Sarah Applegate.
Please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have a whole lot prepared today because it was my understanding that everyone here has fairly clearly heard my story and why I'm the one sitting in this chair. I'm sorry. I'm here to represent my children, not just the victim, but all of my children. There are 4 of them. And I'm here to advocate for them. I would say that the most pertinent words in this bill to me is the best interest of the child or children. That's what I've been after this whole time. And it seems to me that through the process of this entire scenario, which has taken course over the course of, I think, 8 years now, the best interest of the offender was taken into account. Obviously, we're all in favor of innocent until proven guilty. We're all in favor of due process and the idea that, you know, we have to prove that this person did what he did. We don't want to just go off the word of some crazy ex-wife, as I've been accused of being. However, the best interest of the children is supposed to be the primary consideration in a custody case. And I don't feel like the people involved had the tools at their disposal to make a proper, I don't know what the word is, a proper judgment on what to do in this situation. There were red flags after red flags after red flags that I brought to everyone's attention, and really the most important thing was to maintain his parental rights and get him back to having those fully restored, which in my opinion was never in the best interest of the children. I would equate this to anyone who is in trouble for alcohol abuse. They're not allowed to go to bars anymore. They're not allowed to do those things, but you put a bottle in their dresser and say, don't touch that. My ex-husband, the father of my children, was a sex offender with a very serious issue that he has since admitted to, sort of. And what we did was we removed the temptation of all of the other children, except for mine. And I wasn't given any ability to protect them from someone that I knew was a threat. And they were too young to be able to coach through it, and that's seen as something I shouldn't be doing anyway. So my daughter was served up on a platter to someone with a very serious disorder. I would appreciate the consideration of this bill and eventually the passing of this bill, because I think it gives the tools to anyone involved to be able to make a proper discernment next time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Committee, any questions for Ms. Applegate? Hearing none. Representative Pendergraft.
If I may close with this, I did present this bill to 2 sitting Supreme Court justices here in Wyoming and a district court judge. I spoke to several attorneys, and they actually said the same thing that my daughter just said, that this is good for them to be able to have something to lean on that is in statute, rather than having, you know, they do have some leniency to do that. But this just, it serves as a reminder, and it also gives them something to point to in when you come to affecting somebody's parental rights. You better have a good case. And that's why we're bringing this. We just want to have this issue put on the table. So thank you for your attention.
Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I have one question for Mr. Pendergraft. Just a curiosity, what's the rationale behind the effective date of July 1st rather than effective immediately?
Representative Pendergraft.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the question, Representative Kelly. To be honest, I did not greatly consider that. I was focused about what I was trying to accomplish here, and that is the normal process. Obviously, we'd consider the friendly amendment to make it effective immediately. It doesn't involve any financial aspects to that. It would be a simple fix. So I thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Any other questions, committee? All right. Thank you, Representative Pendergraft. Do we have any agencies that sponsored this bill that would like to comment? No? All right. Let's move on to any public comment in favor of the bill. Anyone opposed? And do we have anyone online? Not for this bill. All right. It's final chance for public comment on this bill. All right, we'll close close public comment. Committee, what is your pleasure? Moved by Chairman Washit, seconded by Representative Lean. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Chestick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to propose an amendment which I believe is acceptable to the bringer of the bill. On line 23, page 2, line 23, just insert the word rebuttable before the word presumption. The reason for this is the first question any judge will have when they see there's a presumption is, well, is it rebuttable or conclusive? Because those are the two kinds of presumptions. And I think the intent here is to make it rebuttable, to add to the other rebuttable presumptions. So I would propose that amendment.
Second.
All right, the amendment has been moved by Representative Chestick and seconded by Representative Filer. Any discussion on the amendment? All right. Question having been called? Oh, Representative Bratton.
Yeah, Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have some general questions to help me understand this topic a little bit better. So it appears that in my research, it looks like that offenses requiring registration as a sex offender can't be expunged. So I just want to confirm that that is the case, or can somebody speak to that?
Representative Bratton, are you on the amendment right now or on the bill?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm on the bill.
All right,
Withdraw the question. Thank you.
thank you. Any other discussion on the amendment? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, no. The amendment passes. We're back on the bill. So Representative Bratton.
Thank you. So I was just wondering, do sex offenders ever have their record expunged in Wyoming?
Representative Pendergraph? Or? Ms. Chambers. Ms. Chambers. Victim Services, Attorney General's Office. What's her last name? Oh. Ms. Chambers, please state your name for the record.
Good morning. Sorry, you'll get used to this. My name is Kara Chambers. I'm with the Attorney General's Office. The Division of Criminal Investigation is part of the Attorney General's Office, and I have just enough information to be dangerous. Certain circumstances, the answer is yes, Chairman, and through you, Representative Bratton. Depends on, there's several levels of sex offender registry. Some levels cannot, some can.
Representative Bratton?
Let's see. Does it make any difference if a conviction or registration has occurred prior to any certain age as to those? Or, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Co-Chairman, Chairman Singh, Representative Bratton. Yes, the levels of sex offender registry depend on the offenses that were committed. So in other words, if it was a first degree and if it had to do with the age of the victim, there's so many nuances to this. I don't want to get too in the weeds, but yes, it does depend on the severity of the offense, the age of the victim, the age of the offender, because depending on the age of the victim, how much older the offender might have been.
Follow-up?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So another question I have that you might be able to answer, if that's all right with you, Mr. Chairman, is if somebody's is a registered sex offender from another state and then comes into Wyoming, then each state has its own laws. So, but automatically they have to register as a sex offender in this state. How does that impact this?
Ms. Chambers?
Chairman, Co-Chairman Singh, Representative Bratton. I hate to do the whole, it depends, but it depends. Generally, yes. Depending on the level of registration, a sex offender would have to register in wherever they are residing. I'm not going to say that there aren't certain circumstances. In fact, the Judiciary heard about them a couple of years ago, that there was an offender out of state who was convicted of a crime that did not have a reciprocal conviction that required registration in our state. And so there are some of those occasions that can occur, but in general, yes, you have to register. But there's always that, I can't draw a bright line for you, but in general, yes.
Any follow-up?
No, thank you.
All right. Representative Filer?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And of course, I'm shooting from the hip here, but I did read. Out-of-state convictions, if an individual is convicted of a crime in another state, that would require registration in Wyoming under the federal law. they must register if they move to Wyoming or work in Wyoming.
Any other questions for Ms. Chambers? All right. Any other discussion on the bill? Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I propose that on page 3, line 5, we strike July 1st, 2025 and insert immediately.
All right, we have an amendment to make this act effective immediately. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Representative Lean. All right, all those in favor, oh, Representative Filer?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, on the amendment, I have no problems with this, but if we did do this, if there's certain cases out there right now being litigated for divorce, would that kind of change the rules in the middle of the game? I would like to ask somebody that's way smarter than me at that, if one of y'all want to come up.
Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. The answer to that for me is I don't know, but if the effective date is July 1st, there will still be cases pending during that month as well. So the same problem, making it in July doesn't solve that potential issue.
All right. Any other discussion on the amendment? Question being called. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The amendment passes. We're back on the bill. Committee, any other amendments on this bill? Right, hearing none. Any question being called?
Second.
Seconded by Representative Kelly. Let's go ahead and call the roll.
Representative Brady,
Aye.
Representative Breton,
Aye.
Representative Chestick,
Aye.
Representative Filer,
Aye?
Representative Kelly,
Aye.
Representative Lean,
Aye.
Vice Chair Singh,
Aye.
Representative Webb,
Aye.
Chairman Washit.
Aye.
9 ayes.
House Bill 83 has passed committee. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 62.
Good morning. Again, my name is Kara Chambers, and I am with the Wyoming Attorney General's Office. I'm the Director of the Division of Victim Services. And in that capacity, I have chaired the Attorney General's Human Trafficking Task Force since 2016.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Affie Ellis. I'm a former state senator representing Senate District 8. I was asked here by the primary sponsor of this bill to just provide some perspective on an old friend. We've seen this legislation before, but you'll see that the lead sponsor is Representative Heiner. I did text him and let him know that this bill was, or the prior bill was wrapping up, so I don't know how you want to proceed, if you want us to jump in and have Ms. Chambers discuss the bill or wait for Representative Heiner.
Let's go ahead and have Ms. Chambers proceed.
Thank you, Co-Chairman Singh. I'm happy to walk you through the bill if needed. These are some very simple changes beginning on page 1, line 13. Are amending section A, which follows on to page 2, line 1 through 9, adding that a definition of intimate parts as previously defined earlier in the statute, and then defining sexual contact, which means the touching with the intention of sexual arousal, gratification, or abuse of another person's intimate parts by the actor, or of the actor's intimate parts by the other person, or of the clothing covering the intimate area of the other person's intimate parts. And then we have a new subsection B that adds on line, beginning at the end of line 14 through 16, including or an act of sexual contact as defined by paragraph A2 of this section. So we then see on page 3 just a conforming amendment to the existing language. If I may, again, here representing the Human Trafficking Task Force, this came to us from our law enforcement partners across the state to address issues with the illicit massage industry. Specifically, it was originally brought a couple of years ago, and then again by former Senator Ellis, dealing with issues out of Campbell County, Natrona County, and Sweetwater County specifically. We do have individuals lined up online to testify, including Terry Markham, who's the Executive Director of Uprising, which is our state's only nonprofit dedicated to working on human trafficking, education awareness, and training of law enforcement. And then I believe she's also lined up law enforcement to testify, and I think their testimony might be more useful than mine. But with that, I would stand for any questions.
Representative Watchett. Chairman Watchett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The definition of sexual contact on page 2 is identical to that sexual contact definition in the sexual assault statutes. Is that correct? Or is there differences?
Chairman Washington, I believe there's a slight nuance that was needed under this section because we did have Senator Ellis has delved more deeply into this.
Senator Ellis, welcome back, by the way.
Private Citizen Ellis. Yes, Mr. Chairman, just to kind of step back a little bit, under our prostitution statutes, there are two definitions. We get after sexual intrusion, which is pretty straightforward for prostitution purposes, that's illegal, but sexual contact isn't. And so this, if you look at the definition in the sexual assault statutes, it talks about touching with the intention of sexual arousal, gratification, or abuse of the victim's intimate parts. And because that word victim is in there, we had a little bit of concern that, maybe an overzealous attorney would say, well, a prostitute's not a victim. So the definition is just, or vice versa. So we just adjusted that language slightly to talk about a person participating in that certain activity. But otherwise, the language mirrors.
Any other questions from the committee? Representative Filer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Ellis. So if I get this right, so kind of just an analogy, you got to help my non-lawyer mind here. So if somebody was to say at a massage parlor, either person could really be the victim in this then. So if it was solicited by the client or if it was solicited by the massage therapist. So is that why it's defined that way? So either person could actually be the victim in this case?
Chairman Washit, Co-Chairman Singh, and Representative Filer, we are intentionally not using the word victim in this category for that reason. But maybe more to your point, why the Human Trafficking Task Force is interested in this is because this act is not previously illegal in our statute definitions. So there was a loophole, as it were, which federal law enforcement requires a predicate state offense in order to go in and investigate these massage parlors. And if that particular act was not illegal, they had no underlying offense to go in to look for if that was the only thing that was going on and not sexual intrusion. So this is closing that area.
Any other questions from the committee? Chairman Washit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Chambers, do we have testimony coming that this is actually occurring in Wyoming?
Chairman Washit, I believe you will, yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Private Citizen Ellis.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I have a whole bunch of points that I can make, but I think it'd be more effective for you to hear from some of the witnesses, and then perhaps we could offer just a few closing remarks. But this is a very real problem in Wyoming. It's continuing. And when we talk about who, is involved, I've heard some discussion that prostitution should be legalized in Wyoming, and this is a form of entrepreneurship. But I think when you hear what's actually happening, it paints a very different picture. And so we will provide all that information, but it might be helpful to hear from some people who work with these victims directly.
Any other questions from the committee? I do have a question for either Ms. Applegate or Ms. Ellis. So how would this affect institutions oriented towards dancing and private dances?
Chairman Washit, Co-Chairman, I'm not sure how to answer that question. I don't know what you're referring to. If they're doing something that falls under this definition, I suppose it would be a problem. If they're, we're under the prostitution statutes and solicitation statutes, so we're also talking about an exchange of money and coercion in a, I don't know how to answer your question, sir.
Okay, Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Okay, this is uncomfortable, but I think what Vice Chair Singh is asking is about the traditional lap dance where there may be physical contact and some arousal, but not necessarily to the extent that's targeted in this change.
Ms. Chambers, tell us any thoughts.
Co-Chairman Singh, I think that is a question for our law enforcement folks to answer. I'm actually not sure. I see what you're getting at. I'm not sure how that would cover this. Not sure how to answer that, sir.
Mr. Chairman, give us a minute, if we listen to some of the other testimony, I think let me just pull up the definition of intimate parts. Certainly a component of this is the touching. And I'll confess, I've never been to a strip club, so I don't know what happens at those kind of establishments.
Representative Filer.
Mr. Chairman, I think what the definition is the intention. I think that's the word that we're looking at. So if we, the intention of sexual arousal, and in some of these instances, that's a profession that, everybody knows that there's, let's throw it out there, strip clubs, right? And their intention might be at times for sexual arousal in order to make more money, right? I just worried about that word, but I get it though. I totally get it. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions from the committee? All right, we'll move on to any comments from any agencies? Any others that'd like to comment? All right, we'll move on to public comment. Start with folks in the room. Sure, let's go ahead and put them online.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Ms. Markham, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Good morning, committee members. Thank you for allowing me to speak this morning. My name is Terry Markham. I am the executive director for Uprising, which is an anti-human trafficking agency that operates here in the state. Our primary role in the state is providing education and training. So we are sort of the, preferred provider to train local law enforcement. We get state funding to train law enforcement. And for us, how we came to be part of the support of this bill is over the past, actually about 4 years, through our work with law enforcement, one of the things that has continued to come up is illicit massage investigations that law enforcement were working on. And we have always hit a snag with this loophole, as Kara called it. That's truly what it's been for us, because in order for law enforcement to investigate, they sort of need that crime to get their foot in the door, so to speak, so that they can go after the bigger fish and look for the larger crimes like the money laundering and different things. I know we have a DCI officer on the line to speak next, so I'll let him speak to the investigative part. I really just wanted to speak to the victim side of things. And I know that there was one question already this morning on, is this actually happening? Have we identified these victims in our state? And we have. There have already been some investigations and busts, if you will, of illicit massage parlors within our state. I actually got to go and be there with law enforcement during one of these investigations, and I got to sit and spend some time with one of the victims out of those massage parlors. And I think in general, a lot of people just sort of assume, I think most people know what happens in some of these massage parlors, but they have this assumption that if it's just consenting adults, why bother with it? But that's not actually the case. What we know about illicit massage parlors is it's primarily like one giant ring, actually. And I think the officer will speak to that. But the women are absolutely victims. They are basically, for lack of a better word, they're almost scammed to come to the US from primarily Southeast Asian countries where they've aged out of their workforce there. They're typically like 30 years and older. They take out enormous loans just to get their documents and get on the plane to get here. And then basically, as soon as they get to the US, they're told they're going to be taking part in commercial sex. That's extremely shameful for their culture. So at that point, they're very unlikely to reach out for any help. And then once they actually get here and they start working in these businesses, they're moved around quite frequently so that they can't develop deep relationships or safe people to disclose to. And then they're often held in what we would call debt bondage, meaning everything that they do, their day-to-day lives, they're constantly being charged. And sometimes they'll actually keep ledgers that law enforcement have found where, you know, every time they take a break, they're charged. When they eat, they're charged. When they go to sleep, they're charged. So they can never work out of that initial debt to get here, much less work out of the day-to-day debt. And I can tell you from personal experience with speaking with that victim, when we asked her how much she was actually making per massage, she said that she was making 25 yen. And I had to Google that because I don't know how much that is. And it's basically the equivalent of about 11 or 12 cents in the US. And so that's what she was getting paid. So this is like, it's kind of blurs the lines between sex trafficking and labor trafficking, actually. And so where they make any money at all to send back to their families is from their tips. And we know how they're getting their tips. So these women actually, they definitely are victims. And we've seen it in our state. Surely we don't have, you know, as many as, you know, a big metropolis city would have. But I think you might be surprised per capita what we're actually dealing with these. And I think, like I said, the other officer, I think he can speak to the prevalence of these a lot better than I can. But I just wanted to make sure that people knew from our side why we're invested in this, and like the Human Trafficking Task Force cares, is because this will increase the potential that law enforcement can actually get in there and look for the actual traffickers who we want to catch. But we need those buyers who are saying, this is what's happening, I'm getting a happy ending. We need to have that be criminalized so that we can get our foot in the door to go after the bigger fish, so to speak. I'm happy to answer any questions on this side of things if you have it, but I think Andy will provide a lot more clarity for you on the investigative side and what law enforcement deals with.
Thank you, Ms. Markham. Any questions from the committee? Hearing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Let's go on to Mr. Yednak. Welcome.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Good morning, Chairman, distinguished legislators. My name is Andrew Yednak. That's spelled Y-E-D-I-N-A-K, and I am the supervisory agent in charge of the Human Trafficking Unit for the state of Montana within the Division of Criminal Investigation under the Montana Department of Justice. And I come before you this morning in support of the passage of House Bill 62. Your proposed House Bill 62 definitions of intimate parts and sexual contact, these definitions are critical for addressing a devastating reality. That being that according to the Polaris Project, on average, 26 to 39 individuals are exploited annually within a single illicit massage business across this country. These definitional clarifications will directly target trafficking mechanisms in illicit massage businesses by closing the loopholes that exist that allow systemic sexual exploitation. Recognize that current statutes inadvertently permit practices such as the manual stimulation of a person's genitals, otherwise known in this world as a hand job, creating environments where, again, on average, 26 to 39 victims can be trapped annually. Provide law enforcement precise statutory language to dismantle trafficking networks operating under the guise of legitimate businesses. Signal Wyoming's commitment to protecting vulnerable individuals from commercial sexual exploitation. Folks, by implementing these definitions, you're not just updating your legal language, which has become consistent across many states to include here in Montana. You're directly intervening to protect dozens of potential trafficking victims each year. In 2019, the state of Montana passed very similar legislation, adding consistent definitions to our laws, which since have helped law enforcement to be able to dismantle several of these illicit massage businesses across our state and to recover the victims being forced into these heinous crimes. I thank you for the opportunity to be here with you this morning, and if you have any questions, I will stick around to answer those for you. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions from the committee? Chairman Washit.
Good morning, sir. Appreciate your testimony. We just had a question here in the committee, I don't know if you heard it, about lap dancing and how this or statute might be applied or misapplied in that circumstance. Do you have any experience of how that law was been used in your state?
Representative Chairman, thank you for the question. Yes, as I was hearing that question, I was looking back and forth between the proposed bill here as well as Montana law. One recommendation that I would have in where ours differs is that we do not have the language in ours where it states or of the clothing covering the intimate area of another person's intimate part. I believe that is where it becomes confusing for you with the question of the lap dance, if you will. Whereas our law simply states sexual contact that is direct and not through clothing with another person for compensation. Therefore, that takes care of the problem that you're having, and you would have to have that physical contact of person to person, but direct and not through the clothing.
Thank you, Mr. Yednak. Any other questions from the committee? All right, hearing none. Thank you for your testimony. I see the bringer of the bill is in the room with us today, so let's go ahead and have him come on up. Majority Floor Leader Heiner.
Vice Chair, thank you for this opportunity to be here. Scott Heiner, Representative Scott Heiner from House District 18. Apologize for being here late, but this is something that's very important for our police force, for our law enforcement personnel. To me, when I first got involved with this piece of legislation, I thought this was going to penalize the wrong people. It's going to hurt the victims. This is more about human trafficking, and I was afraid it was going to hurt the victim more than those that are perpetrating this. But in reality, you have to be able to extract these individuals from their situation, and the only way to do that is through legislation like this, having policy that allows our enforcement to be able to extract them. So that's why this is important. I've learned a lot about these kind of situations. It's very unfortunate, and this has been an effort over multi-years to bring these kind of tools to our law enforcement agencies to be able to enforce and help with this human trafficking issue. And I think it's just going to get larger. It's going to get more and more prevalent. And I've seen a number of instances here in Wyoming where this is actually happening. It's not an outside thing. It's everywhere. The question about lap dancing, I think that could be remedied by removing on page 2, lines 8 and 9, actually removing that part. And I think that would be a friendly amendment if we did that. I think that just creates confusion with that situation. So I think that would be a friendly amendment. With that, I stand for any questions. I am grateful to have Emeritus Senator Effie Ellis here. This is something that she championed last year, and it did not get through the House. So I appreciate her being here in support of this and all of those that are testifying. This is important, as you can see. It's something that can help the victims. It's more about human trafficking than it is about prostitution. So I'd appreciate any support you can give to this and stand for any questions.
Thank you, Representative Heiner. Chairman Washit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you elaborate a little more on the value and necessity of having this predicate underlying offense and how that plays into the broader conspiracy cases of trafficking?
May I phone a friend? Mr. Chairman?
We might phone another friend. No, but I think, Director Chambers mentioned it. Law enforcement can't go in there and investigate or remove the victim without that predicate offense. Along those lines, I just wanted to call attention to some of our safe harbor provision statutes. Wyoming Statute 6-2-708 specifically says a victim of human trafficking is not criminally liable for any commercial sex act or other criminal acts committed as a direct result of or incident to being a victim of human trafficking. So how these statutes works together is because there's a predicate offense, law enforcement can intervene, but once that person is removed from that harmful situation, this defense is available. So prosecutors are not looking to prosecute these people. And I think that's a big shift that we've seen. The intention isn't to put women in jail, and by and large, the people performing these services are women because these statutes exist. And if I'm wrong, I'd ask Ms. Chambers to come up here and make sure that I've got that right. And she can talk a little bit too about how law enforcement over the years, they view these people as victims. I don't think anyone's intention is to just simply put more people in jail. And then I'd finally add that this is a problem. Ever since I heard the testimony about the woman receiving 11 cents for the services she's forced to provide, I've just been haunted by that. And so to me, that's one victim too much. So I'm really appreciative of Representative Heiner for bringing this back again. For some of you that are aware, there are counties who have tried to get after this situation by amending their ordinances. The county, Sweetwater County, has tried to tackle this issue, but it leaves them with, just not enough tools in the toolbox without putting it in Title VI in the criminal statutes. I'm trying to think of other things, but one other thing that's also missing from this conversation is the impact that it has on legitimate massage parlors. In Cheyenne, I've happened to gone into these places and there are big signs that said, please don't ask us to perform these acts. We don't do them. And in visiting with some of those, oftentimes immigrants as well, they talk about some of the offers that they're asked to perform, and it really delegitimizes the valid services they provide, and it's dangerous. The last thing I'd add too is that in countries and in some states where they've legalized prostitution or decriminalized sex work, there's just a tremendous amount of danger that's out there for particularly women. The power inequity between men and women in these intimate moments, it's one of the more dangerous things where women report being beaten with little recourse because they're put in these situations. So I just, again, want to emphasize this is a problem. Criminals aren't stupid when they see loopholes in Wyoming, in laws, places like Wyoming. It definitely attracts that kind of activity. So that's the impetus for doing that. And I just want to thank Ms. Chambers and her team and the task force. As I've been involved in this issue, there are dozens of people involved in this issue who have been looking at this. It's brought from the federal level, our county, local law enforcement. So we just really want to thank you for considering it. And to Representative Heiner's point, if you look at line 7, page 2, after the word person, insert a period and then strike or of the, and that would get rid of the talking about the clothing issue for purposes of lap dances. So happy to answer any more questions. Thank you for letting me add those additional points.
Thank you, Ms. Ellis. Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. You had mentioned women involved in this trade. Do we have any data on how many are or were girls in this trade? How many were pulled into this when they were still minors?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have that data. And then some of the websites and other resources that I've looked at, resources I received from the task force talk about kind of the global issue. But yes, young women are definitely, in my involvement with this issue, I don't have a statistic, but anecdotally, yes, I think this is definitely something that affects younger women.
Follow-up?
So just to clarify, by younger women, we mean children.
Ms. Ellis.
Mr. Chairman, I just don't want to speak with any certainty. I can tell you that in a former life and in my current life, I've done a lot of work on missing murdered Indigenous women and girls. And crimes against young women in particular are high. And I can't say that they're children. In my view, anything from 10 to 22, to me, those are all girls. And those are heartbreaking things. In the missing murdered Indigenous women context, those tend to be some of the most vulnerable victims. Does that translate directly to statistics related to this bill? I can't say that definitively, and so I don't want to leave you with the wrong impression.
Any other questions, committee? I do have a question for either Representative Heiner or Ms. Ellis. So if this particular situation is concerning two individuals that are privately, engaging in this activity. Let's say that these individuals decided that they both agreed that they wanted to do this, and then that they were going to film this activity and then sell this film. Would that then become legal?
Mr. Chairman, under your fact scenario, I don't know that if there are two consenting adults, that doesn't cover this.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? All right, moving right along. Thank you both of you for being here today. We have public comment. Please state your name for the record.
Hello, my name is Justin Scott. I'm a native to Wyoming, a graduate of Casper College and from the University of Wyoming. I'm a retired Wyoming undersheriff and the current executive director of the Albany Advisory Council on Trafficking. I want to thank you guys for giving me this brief opportunity to talk to you. I had a long speech prepared, but I'm going to skip it because everybody has done such a great job of explaining. But I just quickly wanted to explain one thing that's been missed. Terry Markham in Sheridan and Uprising and her colleagues, including myself, have put together some great training for law enforcement in Wyoming. And we have traveled around the state for the last couple years and have taught advanced human trafficking efforts to communities, specifically law enforcement, in places like Rock Springs, Powell, Newcastle, Laramie. We're chalking up this year to hit Lander and Jackson, and those are usually regional classes. They're post-certified. They're free to law enforcement. And one of the biggest key things that we teach about that is protecting victims. We really enforce that protecting the victim mentality. We don't even use the language as prostitutes anymore. We consider them victims. We have a victim approach, and that's how we approach it from the beginning. And so it's a turn from when I was in law enforcement. For one, some of our statutes came out in 2013 for human trafficking, and we didn't even recognize them when I was in law enforcement. And for going to that and to where we are today is impressive with our law enforcement. They're not eager to entrap people or do such things like that. They're eager to help our victims and our survivors of trafficking. So with that, do you guys have any questions for me?
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Chairman Washit.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Scott, you speak a little bit about the individuals who are securing these types of services. It seems to me that you've got to be a troubled individual to have to pay for someone to do these things, and that you have to be completely overlooking the exploitation aspect of all this. And so could you speak to me about who these people are, what you find when these folks are apprehended? What kind of characters are we talking about?
Mr. Scott.
Yes, thank you, guys. If you interview them, they all come from a difficulty. They all have a story. Let it be they have trouble at home, they have financial trouble, they're in some sort of difficulty. Beyond specifics such as that, they're in a bind, whatever that might be. Terry, as she said on the interview just a bit ago, she's interviewed these individuals face to face, and some of them are just guys that are down on their luck and regretted the decision the second that they did it. Some of them are veterans that know exactly what they're doing and have done it for a very long time. And they just got caught. Some of them are very, very troubled and have some deep mental health issues that need a lot of care. So it's kind of a roundabout deal, Chairman.
Chairman Washit.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up, Mr. Chairman. So do these individuals who are securing these services appreciate, are they even aware of the exploitation that's taking place?
Mr. Scott.
Without digging into their minds, I can't fully answer that question, but my assumption would be no. They don't know, they don't care.
Any other questions from the committee? Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I just wanted to clarify for the record and for anyone listening online. When we say veterans, we are talking about repeat customers and not members of our armed services, correct?
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Yes, Representative Kelly, that is exactly what I mean.
Any other questions from the committee? Hearing none, thank you, Mr. Scott.
Thank you, guys.
All right, further public comment? Welcome.
Good morning.
Please state your name for the record.
My name is Greg Hunter. I'm from Laramie, Wyoming. I spoke on, I'm going to agree with Representative Heiner. I do think these things will increase as we limit online sexual instruction. It's very interesting when people read these bills and they think of, the lap dance question. I really thought of the 8th grade dance myself, and that particular time frame. So I didn't want to look at criminalizing those particular actions in that area. And so when the gentleman talked yesterday, or a couple days ago, that Europe doesn't have online sexual instruction. Well, there might be a case for that because in Europe, it's legal. You can go into Brussels and there's a red light district, and maybe
Mr. Hunter, please.
Yes, I know I'm going to talk on the bill, and the bill is that if you're going to take out clothes, then will there be more? In other words, if they're using a glove or something like that, would that be a clothing item? So how are we going to do all this? And I would argue that we would have no more sexual or, use of illegal immigrants or immigrants if we made prostitution is a terrible word, sex work legal. So again, we are now doing two things that are going to drive this product underground again. And I really do think we should consider, legalizing sex work and not making sex a terrible thing. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Any questions from the committee? All right, thank you for your testimony. Any other public comment? No folks online? All right. Oh, Mr. Thompson.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. My name is Alan Thompson. I'm the Executive Director of WASCOP, the Wyoming Association of Sheriffs and Chiefs of Police. And there were some questions about existing law and consenting adults, not what we're trying to encapsulate with this bill. And I would just mention to to the committee that maybe if you look at the entire context of the existing solicitation of prostitution and prostitution law, I don't know of a single case in Wyoming where we've ever captured that consenting adults doing it for entertainment purposes or selling purposes or any of the other reasons we discussed earlier that were prosecuted under this. This has been exclusively for what we've been discussing today and how it impacts human trafficking and so forth. And also wanted to mention that as you look at some of the ordinances across the state that were enacted in order to start these investigations and build them into bigger human trafficking investigations, that separation of the court from municipal court to circuit court makes that investigation process very difficult because you have to time exactly the dismissal and the refiling of charges amongst two different courts, which is almost impossible to do from an officer standpoint. But when the case originates in the circuit court system and then moves into the district court system, it's a much easier process for law enforcement to investigate this fully with that human trafficking component in mind. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if you'd have any, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Any questions? Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Mr. Thompson, I'm glad you came up here because I wanted to ask you this. I was going to ask if we could even call him up here. Since you're very familiar with the law enforcement community, are you aware of any instances where law enforcement officers have come across circumstances under which they suspected something related to sex trafficking, yet this blind spot in our statute prohibited them from doing anything?
Mr. Thompson.
Mr. Chairman, yes, so I am personally not firsthand aware of that, but our conversations about that have been multiple instances of that going across the state. And I would also say that many other statutes in addition to this are ones that we want to investigate and get the kind of that crack in the door to open the investigation involving, especially when we talk about children under the age of 18. We start with just a curfew thing because they look too young, and then you find out that they're with a 25-year-old, and then that helps build that investigation. So when we use other existing statutes, such as the expansion of this, minor expansion of this statute, it helps immensely in us building the bigger cases which tend to benefit multiple victims, not just the one we're working with at that time.
Any other questions from the committee? Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Any other public comment? Nothing online? Representative Washit.
I wonder if maybe we have Mr. Scott come back up to the stand and maybe add some response to Representative Kelly's question.
Mr. Scott.
Thank you again. So to your question, Representative Kelly, I know personally of a very recent case that occurred, and without having the permission to talk about it, I will say that there is an ongoing investigation that hasn't concluded yet in our state that that hasn't yet, but is looking like it's going to fail because of this exact detail. And I know of others that haven't even been looked into because they know that this is going to fail. There are illicit massage businesses in our state that there's loopholes intact, that there's nothing that we can do until we have statutes in place that could handle this.
Representative Washit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we made this act effective immediately, might that advance these investigations or be ex post facto?
I would imagine it would be too late, Chairman. And I would have to I'd have to communicate that with the investigating agency.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Any questions for Mr. Scott? Hearing none, thank you. All right. Does any other public comment? Once? Twice? 3 times? All right. We're going to close public comment. Committee, what is your pleasure? Moved by Representative Kelly, seconded by Representative Lean. Any discussion on the bill? All right, any amendments? All right. Well, I'd like to make an amendment on page 2, line 7. We'll strike the words "or of the clothing covering the immediate area of another person's intimate parts" from line 7 to line 9.
Put a period after person.
Yep, and put a period after person. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Chairman Washut. Any discussion on the amendment?
Discussion.
Discussion? Chairman Washut.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think this helps us get past some of those other issues. But I also see these illicit parlors, continue to operate with a, through the clothing kind of touching issue could still be there. And I do believe that by taking this out, it does not create a loophole where if the actor is wearing a glove, because we're taking out the clothing of the other person. So I think it's a good amendment.
Any further discussion on the amendment? Representative Chestick.
I also support the amendment. I understand the purpose of the bill, and I'm 100% behind the purpose of the bill. I was afraid that it might be overbroad, and I think this amendment, and this is the part that was probably overbroad, removing this gives me much more comfort in supporting the bill. Thank you.
Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The amendment passes. We're back on the bill. Any further discussion on the bill? Any amendments? Hearing none.
Mr. Chairman,
Oh, Representative Lean.
I move to amend page 3, line 15 to make it effective immediately for those cases that may be coming forward. Sorry, is there a second?
Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Webb. All right, please continue.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just for any cases that may be coming in litigation or to give the law enforcement the opportunity to start acting immediately.
Any further discussion on the amendment? Representative Chestick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand the impulse to want to do things quickly and get things into effect immediately. I think we should resist that. I think making something effective immediately should be the rare case. And I was okay in the last bill because it didn't really change the law that much. This is a significant change. And I think we do need to have some ramp up period just for notice for potential victims that this is going to be coming in, give them a chance to find out what the law is before they're bound by it. So I think this is not one of the situations where I think immediate effectiveness is appropriate, so I would vote against this bill, or against the amendment.
Any further discussion on the amendment? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed, no? No. All right, the amendment passes. We're back on the bill. Any further discussion on the bill? Hearing none. Clerk, please call the roll.
Representative Brady,
Aye.
Representative Breton,
Aye.
Representative Chestick,
Aye.
Representative Feiler,
He left an absentee ballot of aye.
Representative Kelly,
Aye.
Representative Lean,
Aye.
Vice Chair Singh,
Aye.
Representative Webb,
Aye.
Chairman Washit.
Aye.
9 ayes.
Excellent work, committee. And Representative Heiner will be carrying this bill on the floor. Thank you. Unless there's any other business, this meeting is adjourned.
We should leave that.
Good job, Dave.